The airport was a blur of noise and motion, but Daniel Harper, 42, moved through it like a man underwater, each step heavy with exhaustion. His weathered leather jacket hung loose on his frame, and his graying stubble betrayed 3 weeks of grueling work in Seattle. All he wanted was to collapse into his Brooklyn apartment, but something felt off the moment he turned the key. The apartment was too quiet. No clatter of dishes, no hum of music from his daughter Maya's room. Just a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter, her looping handwriting spelling out, "Dad." His heart lurched. Maya, 16, wasn't one for notes. She'd text him a meme before leaving a letter. He unfolded it, his calloused fingers trembling, and read the first line. "I need you to know who I am." The words hit like a punch, pulling him into a story he hadn't seen coming. Daniel sank into a chair, the note shaking in his hands. Maya wrote about her truth, her identity, her love for a girl named Riley, and the fear that had kept her silent for years. She wasn't home. She was at Riley's, waiting for him to process this. Daniel's world tilted. He'd always thought he knew his daughter, raised her alone since her mom left when she was 6. But this was a door he hadn't known existed, and it was wide open now. He reread the note, each word carving deeper. Maya described stolen glances with Riley at school, the way her heart raced when their hands brushed during art club. She wrote about the pain of hiding, the weight of his expectations as a single dad who'd always called her his little girl. Daniel's chest tightened, not from anger, but from the realization he'd missed so much. He'd been gone too long, chasing contracts across the country, thinking he was building a future for her. Instead, he'd left her to face this alone. The Brooklyn night pressed against the windows, city lights flickering like distant stars. Daniel's mind raced back to his own past, to a summer in his 20s when he'd loved someone he shouldn't have. A man named Ethan, a painter with a laugh like sunlight. They'd met in a dive bar in Greenwich Village, sharing cheap beer and dreams of a freer world. But Daniel had walked away, scared of what it meant, scared of his family's judgment. He'd buried that part of himself, locked it behind a life of work and fatherhood. Now Maya's words cracked that lock wide open. He grabbed his phone, instinct urging him to call her, but he stopped. She'd asked for space, for him to think before he spoke. Daniel leaned back, the note still in his hand, and let the memories flood in. Ethan's smile, the way Daniel had run from it, the years of silence that followed, building a life that felt safe but incomplete. Maya wasn't running. She was standing tall, braver than he'd ever been. He needed to find her, to show her he could be brave too. Daniel pulled on his jacket and headed out into the crisp October air. The streets of Brooklyn buzzed with life, couples laughing outside cafes, kids skateboarding under streetlights. He walked toward Riley's house, a brownstone a few blocks away, his mind a tangle of fear and resolve. What if Maya thought he'd reject her? What if he'd already failed her by not seeing her truth sooner? The note had ended with a plea. "Please, Dad, just love me." He would. He had to. But first, he needed to face his own past to meet her in the present. The brownstone loomed ahead, warm light spilling from its windows. Daniel paused, gripping the note in his pocket like a lifeline. He wasn't just walking to find his daughter. He was walking toward a truth he'd buried long ago. The door opened before he could knock, and there was Maya, her eyes wide with hope and fear. "Dad?" she whispered. And in that moment, Daniel knew this was the beginning of something unbreakable. Maya stood in the doorway, her braids framing a face that was both familiar and new to Daniel. At 16, she had her mother's sharp cheekbones but his stubborn jaw, and tonight, her eyes held a vulnerability that cut him to the core. "You read it?" she asked, clutching the edge of the door. "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice rough. "Can we talk?" He glanced past her into the brownstone, where Riley, a lanky girl with a pixie cut and a nervous smile, hovered in the hallway. The air was thick with unspoken questions, but Maya nodded and stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. They walked to the park across the street, the same one where Maya and Riley had spent countless afternoons sketching and laughing. The benches were empty now, leaves crunching under their feet. Daniel sat first, patting the space beside him. Maya hesitated, then sat, her hands twisting in her lap. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she started. "But you're always gone, and I couldn't keep it in anymore." Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm here now, Maya. I'm listening." He wanted to reach for her, to pull her into a hug like when she was little, but she was holding herself so tightly, like she might break if he pushed too hard. She told him about Riley, how they'd met in art club, how Riley's bold sketches of cityscapes made Maya feel seen, how their friendship had bloomed into something more. "She's not just a friend, Dad. She's everything." Maya's voice cracked, and Daniel saw the weight she'd been carrying, the fear of his reaction. He wanted to say the right thing, but his own past kept clawing its way up. "I loved someone once," he said, surprising himself. Maya's eyes snapped to his, wide and searching. "His name was Ethan. I was 25, thought I had the world figured out. But I didn't. I ran from him because I was scared. I thought I was protecting myself, but I just lost something." His voice wavered, and he looked away, the memory of Ethan's disappointed eyes burning in his mind. Maya was quiet, processing. "You never told me," she said finally. "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought it didn't matter anymore. I had you, my job, this life. I thought I could just be someone else." Daniel rubbed his face, the stubble scratching his palms. "But reading your note, Maya, it's like I'm seeing myself again. And I don't want you to hide like I did." She blinked back tears, her shoulders loosening slightly. "I thought you'd be mad. Or disappointed. Everyone at school's cool with it, mostly, but you're my dad. I didn't know if you'd get it." Daniel reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "I'm not mad. I'm proud of you. Scared, yeah, because I'm your dad and I worry. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He meant it, but the words felt fragile, like they could shatter if he didn't back them up with action. They sat in silence, the park's quiet hum wrapping around them. Maya leaned her head on his shoulder, a small gesture that felt like a bridge. But Daniel knew this was just the start. He had to face his own truths, the ones he'd buried under years of work and denial. And he had to meet Riley, to see the person who'd captured his daughter's heart. As they walked back to the brownstone, Maya's steps were lighter, but Daniel's heart was heavy with questions. How would he navigate this? How would he support Maya when he was still untangling his own past? The answers weren't clear, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to ask the questions. Inside the brownstone, Riley's home was a warm contrast to the chilly night. The living room smelled of cinnamon and coffee, with colorful art prints lining the walls. Riley stood awkwardly by the couch, her hands stuffed in her jeans pockets. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm Riley. It's nice to meet you." Daniel nodded, taking her in. She was 17, with a spark in her eyes that reminded him of Maya's when she talked about art. "Nice to meet you too," he said, trying to keep his tone light. Maya sat close to Riley, their shoulders brushing, and Daniel saw the ease between them, the kind of connection he'd once craved with Ethan. Riley's mom, Carla, a woman in her 50s with a warm laugh and a no-nonsense vibe, offered Daniel coffee. "Maya's been a fixture here," she said, her eyes kind but watchful. "She's a good kid." "They both are." Daniel caught the unspoken question in her gaze. "Are you going to be okay with this?" They sat, the four of them, in a circle that felt both intimate and fragile. Maya and Riley shared their story, their words tumbling over each other. They'd been friends for a year before Riley worked up the courage to confess her feelings, leaving a sketch of Maya taped to her locker. "It was awful," Riley laughed, blushing. "I drew her nose all wrong." Maya elbowed her, grinning, and Daniel felt a pang of awe at their openness. But the conversation wasn't all light. Maya admitted how hard it was to come out at school, how some kids whispered behind her back, how she'd overheard a teacher call it a phase. Daniel's jaw clenched. He'd faced similar whispers in his 20s, the sting of judgment that made him shrink himself. He wanted better for Maya, for Riley, for this generation that was braver than his had been. "I want you to be safe," he said, looking at both girls. "Not just from jerks at school, but emotionally. This world can be tough." He hesitated, then added, "I know because I've been there. I loved a man once, and I let fear win. I don't want that for you." Riley's eyes widened, and Maya squeezed her hand. "You keep saying that, Dad," Maya said. "About this guy, Ethan. What happened to him?" Daniel exhaled, the question pulling him back to a Greenwich Village bar, to Ethan's paint-splattered hands and the way he'd made Daniel feel alive. "We were together for a summer. He wanted more, but I wasn't ready. My parents, my job, the way the world was back then. It felt like too much. So I ended it. Moved to Brooklyn, met your mom, had you. I thought I'd moved on. But you didn't," Maya said softly, her insight piercing. "You still think about him." Daniel nodded, the truth heavy. "Yeah. And your note, Maya. It's making me realize I never dealt with it. I just ran." He looked at Riley, then back at Maya. "You two don't run. That's what makes you stronger than I was." Carla watched the exchange, her expression softening. "You're doing all right, Daniel," she said. "You're here talking. That's more than a lot of parents do." Her words were a small comfort, but Daniel knew he had work to do. Not just for Maya, but for himself. As they left the brownstone, Maya hugged him tightly, something she hadn't done in months. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered, "for trying." Daniel held her close, vowing to be the father she needed, even if it meant facing his own ghosts. The next week was a whirlwind. Daniel cut back on work, taking local contracts to stay close to Maya. They spent evenings talking about Riley, about school, about the future. Maya opened up about her dreams of studying art in college, maybe with Riley by her side. Daniel listened, really listened, and it felt like he was meeting his daughter for the first time. But Ethan haunted him. Maya's questions had stirred memories Daniel thought he'd buried. Late at night, he'd scroll through old photos on his phone, lingering on one from that summer. Him and Ethan laughing outside a dive bar, their arms slung around each other. He wondered where Ethan was now, if he'd found happiness, if he ever thought of Daniel. One evening, while Maya was at Riley's, Daniel walked to a coffee shop in Williamsburg, a place he and Ethan used to haunt. The barista, a young guy with tattoos and a friendly grin, mentioned an art gallery opening nearby. "Local artist," he said. "Ethan Caldwell. His stuff's amazing." Daniel froze. Ethan Caldwell. Couldn't be the same Ethan, could it? He went to the gallery, his heart pounding. The space was small but vibrant, filled with paintings of cityscapes and portraits that captured raw emotion. And there, across the room, was Ethan. Older, his hair streaked with gray, but still with that same electric smile. He was talking to a group, his hands animated just like Daniel remembered. Daniel hung back, watching. Ethan's paintings told stories of love and loss, of moments seized and moments missed. One piece, a portrait of two men embracing under a streetlight, hit Daniel like a wave. He knew, without asking, that it was them all those years ago. His eyes stung, and he turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped him. "Daniel." Ethan's tone was incredulous, warm, and wary all at once. They stood there, two men in their 40s, the weight of 2 decades between them. "What are you doing here?" I don't know," Daniel admitted. "My daughter, Maya. She's going through something, and it's bringing up a lot. I saw your name, and I had to come." He gestured to the painting. "That's us, isn't it?" Ethan's smile faltered, then returned, softer. "Yeah, I never forgot you." They talked haltingly at first about their lives. Ethan had built a career as an artist, lived openly, loved freely. Daniel shared about Maya, her courage, her love for Riley. "She's braver than I ever was," he said. "She's teaching me." Ethan nodded, his eyes kind. "You're here now. That's something." They exchanged numbers, a tentative bridge to a past Daniel wasn't sure he could reclaim. As he left the gallery, the night air felt lighter, like he'd taken the first step towards something true. Back home, Daniel told Maya about Ethan. Her face lit up. "You should call him Dad. Like, for real." Daniel laughed, the sound rusty but real. For the first time, he felt like he could be whole, not just for Maya, but for himself. Months passed, and Daniel's life shifted. He and Maya grew closer, their conversations a mix of laughter and honesty. Riley became a regular at their apartment, her sketches littering the kitchen table alongside Maya's. Daniel watched them together, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that didn't always understand. He was learning to be their ally, attending Pride events with them, listening to their stories, and calling out ignorance when he saw it. He and Ethan started meeting for coffee, then dinners. It was slow, careful, like rebuilding a house after a storm. Ethan was patient, but he challenged Daniel to face himself. "You don't get to hide anymore," he said one night, his hand brushing Daniel's. "Not from me, not from you." Daniel didn't pull away this time. One spring evening, Daniel, Maya, Riley, and Ethan went to the Brooklyn Park where it all began. They sat on that same weathered bench, the air warm with promise. Maya and Riley held hands, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Ethan leaned close to Daniel, their shoulders touching, and Daniel felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or the start of it. Maya pulled out her sketchbook, showing them a drawing of the 4 of them, vibrant and alive. "This is us," she said, her voice steady. "All of us." Daniel looked at the sketch, then at his daughter, her girlfriend, and the man who'd once been his world. He realized this was the family he'd been searching for. Not perfect, but real. The note Maya had left him was still in his wallet, a reminder of the day everything changed. It had locked him in, not to a cage, but to a truth he couldn't run from. He was a father, a lover, a man learning to live fully. As the sun set, casting gold over the park, Daniel took Ethan's hand, Maya's eyes catching his with a proud smile. They were all in this together, bound by love, freed by truth.